Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesdays for August 25th, 2021. As usual, we start with a demo, and today we have the new WebAssembly JavaScript host for wasmCloud. Kaushik?
Yep. Hey, thanks, Liam. So quick background. Essentially, the idea was to port the WebAssembly, the wasmCloud host into a browser environment where we can launch actors inside a browser, link them to a provider outside of the browser, and then be able to invoke the running actor that's inside the browser and pass the message back. And everything is connected through NATs. So let me share my screen, and then I can do a quick demo. So this is just kind of the setup of what's going to happen. So we're going to launch an HTTP server provider outside the browser host, and I'm going to use the washboard to do this. Then we'll create a browser host and launch the echo actor from the browser. We'll link the actor to the provider via the washboard UI. We'll curl the local host port that we launch it on to see the response. Then we'll stop the actor and then stop the host to make sure everything tears down properly. And then finally, I'm going to show off how you can use essentially this browser host as a library inside of a different like web application. So right here, I've got a simple index.html page, and all I'm doing is dropping in the compiled wasmCloud.js file. I'm running a Python server that's just rendering the index file. So refresh the page. So the wasmCloud.js module is pretty much global to the page because I'm running the compiled output. So essentially, there's one main method, and it's called, and it's an async function. So you have to do the await, and it's called start host, which will essentially start the browser host. And the parameters are the host name, whether or not you'll be using TLS with your Docker registries. Just because if you are using TLS, you'll have to configure the CORS options, and then the third parameter is a series. It's either an array of NATS host names, or you can pass in a NATS connection object for like authentication, TLS, and whatever other options that NAT supports. And then there's a couple optional parameters. The first one is it's essentially an object where you can pass a series of invocation callbacks where once an invocation happens on an actor, that callback can be triggered and you can essentially use that data to do something on the UI. I'll leave that blank for now. And then the final parameter is essentially when we start a host, we want to do a heartbeat, and the default heartbeat is every 30 seconds. But if for some reason you have some other requirement, you have a way to customize that as the final parameter. So I'm going to start the host, and this usually takes a couple seconds when you're running with the compiled output, just because it has to fetch a wasm file. And what this wasm file is doing is it uses parts of the wasmCloud capabilities library, the Rust nkeys library, and I think there's essentially parts of Rust that was ported over to JavaScript just so that we can generate the host key, because the nkeys JS library doesn't know what the concept of a server key is. So it was easier to just port the Rust implementation over to JavaScript. So when I log the host, it just shows the name, the actors that are running, the heartbeat, the key, the name, the NATS connections options, and then the WebAssembly module that was loaded. So I'm going to go into washboard and start a HTTP server provider. And I'm going to do it from file just because I know the one that I have in my registry is kind of broken. So that's starting. I'll go back into my browser host and start an actor. Wait, that's launch actor. And the actor I'm launching is the echo actor, and it's version 0.2.3. So once I do host.actors, it shows me the actor name and the details. So like the actor count, the actor, the key, the claims, and then the the capabilities as well. So if I go on back into washboard, now I see the actors running and it shows the host ID from my browser host. So I'm going to define a link between the actor and the provider. And it's going to be outside the port 8080. And just to show you guys that I'm not cheating or anything, if I do a else off 8080, I'm not going to have anything right now. But as soon as I create the link, it shows this HTTP server running. And then if I do a curl localhost 8080 echo, it's going to give me that response back from the browser actor. And then we can do host dot stop actor, and you pass in the either the actor reference
Did you curl it first?
Yep.
Oh,
so
okay. No, you did just all right. Sorry.
Yep. So yeah, for the stop actor, you can either pass in the actor key or the reference. And then when you look at the host, the actors were torn down. And then finally, I'm going to stop the host just to kind of tear everything down. Looks like there's a bug there, but essentially we were able to launch an actor inside the browser, link it to a provider outside the browser, and be able to actually invoke the module that was loaded, or the actor module that was loaded. And then the final thing I wanted to show off is using it as a library. So right now it's still a work in progress, but if you wanted to import this into a library, like in a React application or something, you would do something like this, where you would import the wasmCloud JS object. You have a main function, and I essentially doing the same thing that I did in the browser. Log the host, and then I'll attach to the window. This eventually will work. So like the ECMAScript module 6 version, just importing the start host, so you don't need to use the object. The only reason it's not working right now is because we're using the wasm bindgen WebAssembly. There's a bit of issues with the bundling, but that's being worked on. So I'll save this, and then I've got the Webpack configuration. So essentially, you want to compile your main.js into an output file, and at the same time, you want to copy. And this is a hack just for this version. This won't be needed once we have the ES6 version fixed. But essentially, what you're doing is you're copying the compiled wasm into your distribution folder, just so that you don't have to go fetch it from somewhere else. I'm going to stop the server, do an npm init, npm npm install wasmCloud JS. I'm going to also install Webpack CLI, and the copy Webpack plugin. So I've got the index file, the main, the package, the Webpack config, and when I run Webpack, what should happen is it's gonna drop an output.js and a wasm file. So there's the wasmCloud.wasm and the out.js. I'll go back into the index, get rid of this, and reference the out.js, and start the Python server again. And then when I load it up, it shows the window.ws host. So essentially, you can now use this as a library inside of your applications without having to download just the final distribution, like the final output. The caveat there is that you need the Webpack bundler to copy the files into your distribution folder. But that's pretty much the entire idea of the browser host, is a way to launch actors inside of a browser and connect it with a remote lattice. Anything else? Any questions? Anything specific that anyone wants to see?
I wanted to point out a couple of things that I think might have been, people may not realize just how amazing some of this stuff is. The first thing that I wanted to kind of point out was that we got all of our N keys and JSON Web Token security to work in a .wasm file through wasm bindgen. And as a result, we were able to guarantee that the security system that we enforce on the back end is 100% identical to the security system that we're enforcing using the browser. And so there's something very cool about building a WebAssembly runtime for the browser that depends on a WebAssembly module for some of its library functions. The other thing I wanted to point out was that because this works just the same way as all the other hosts do with regard to nets, is if you were to open another tab and open this actor in the other tab, when you go to curl, it's actually essentially going to round robin between the two browser tabs in order to satisfy your request. And so you can essentially just add compute to your army of subservient browser tabs just by opening more wasmCloud hosts everywhere you want them running and starting your actors in those hosts.
Yep. And to Kevin's point, we're also working on adding web worker support. That way we can scale out much better than using just simple async await and promises.
This is amazing. Now, this solves for the actor side. Is it maybe worth mentioning, even though I know it's not in scope now and it's a second phase of work, what it would be like for us to be able to host capabilities in a browser?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, there's obviously some capabilities that we couldn't do, like the HTTP server, but yeah, there's definitely I think possibilities there, because I mean, if it's just WASM files, then as long as the browser can interpret it through, I'm using the wasmCJS library, as long as it can use that, then I think we should be able to at least like give it a stab and see what happens. There are methods to instead of having to manually go into washboard and link the actor to the provider, there are ways for you to do it through the library as well, so you don't need to go in and do things manually. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the high level of the library. Still working on the Webpack side, and then as Liam mentioned, working on like a second phase with adding new features like capability providers, the linking, and etc. Anything else before I hand it over?
I think if Kevin doesn't want to chime in, what would be super exciting, I think, from a capability perspective, would even starting to think about accessing capabilities that are available through a mobile browser. So think about things like access to a camera on a mobile phone, or the possibilities of microphone, or a whole other litany of information or capabilities that would be in a mobile device. I just can imagine and start to get excited about all the things that you might be able to do. So if phenomenal work, Kaushik, and web Bluetooth, Justin, that's a great one. I'm just blown away by this. It really, I think, speaks to our vision that there's no difference, or there's little difference between x86 in the cloud, a web browser, and ARM or some tiny CPU somewhere, where we can have payloads that just seamlessly shift up and down the continuum here, which is sort of the vision we've been driving towards. And we have more vision here. This was originally going to be the quarter of March of the runtimes, was how we started this. And I'm glad that we did. I know we got a little distracted with the scale and the effort around the OTP work that we are kind of following through on this. Looking down the roadmap, I'd love to hear from Kevin later about his thoughts on prioritization, or the community, perhaps about prioritization for Swift host potentially next, or doing a capability provider in a web browser.
Yeah, I've got a number of thoughts there around the Swift runtime. That's definitely one that we've wanted to build. It's just been, we only have so many hands to put to keyboards, and so we just essentially ran out of resources. But that's another one that makes an awful lot of sense to me, is putting a wasmCloud host runtime there. As far as
it's just to speak to that, Kevin, briefly, it's just such a great example of not Linux. When you think about the Better Together story with the cloud native ecosystem, starts with, hey, we're compatible with Kubernetes and containers, and there's a growing part of the world and part of the ecosystem where the assumptions that containers bring to the table around operating on Linux and around operating, compiling for a specific CPU architecture just no longer makes sense. And I think that the more we can support those, the more we inspire other people to see the world the way that we see it. I'm sorry, Kevin, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Just wanted to sort of chime in on that.
Yeah, so I was going to comment on capability providers in the browser. I think, some of them obviously don't make all that much sense running in the browser, like the web server, but there's a good deal of overlap in some functionality that I think might make sense. So, one of the whole purposes of edge computing is to deliver the compute as close to the user as possible, and in theory, as close to the data that the compute operates on as possible. And so what you get when you push compute all the way down to the browser is that's essentially as far out on the edge as you can get. And some of the stuff that you can do there in the browser is access things like the webcam. And so if there was, say, a capability provider that fed frames of video to an actor, then you could have that actor running in the browser alongside the capability provider that's feeding frames of video to it. And that actor could do things like object detection in, using machine learning models and all sorts of stuff, and wouldn't, bat an eyelash at being able to do that. And in addition, would still have all that access to all the actors and providers that are running deep inside the cloud backend. And like I mentioned earlier, you can essentially treat the browser like a hive army of compute, where every time somebody opens a new browser tab, that's essentially a fresh vessel for whatever compute you want to deploy to that browser tab. And so capabilities like being able to access the webcam, capabilities that maybe query and report on location, those types of things are things that work both in a browser and on IoT devices like Raspberry Pis and so on. And so now you can imagine that you've got an actor that performs this object detection on video frames, where finally you have that dream of not having to modify your code at all, and you can dynamically push that actor to a Raspberry Pi and to a browser and to maybe something in the back end that's feeding videos off of an S3 bucket, all through the same exact code logic.
It's truly mind-blowing, the possibilities, and I start to think about things like, if Nest's doorbell code, you could open it up as an app in a web browser or run it on a piece of embedded hardware as well. I mean, I think we're really starting to make some crazy dynamic topologies possible. So I guess I just a quick poll to everyone that's on. Any questions, or I love the sidebar chat over here in the chat. Does anyone want to raise any of these issues just for discussion? If not, Brooks, I think we still have time today. Did you want to do a quick update on the progress on washboard?
Yeah, sure. If nobody has any questions, I'm happy to pause for a second. Cool. So hopefully I have everything set up just fine so that I can do this demo. Let's see, can everybody see a little browser screen here with a somewhat familiar washboard, but a couple changes?
Yep.
Cool. So I've been posting in the Slack for over the past couple of days just to get some UI feedback as I kind of tweak the dashboard into getting ready for MVP. Functionally, it's pretty much there, but I wanted to add a couple of things. One thing that I was working on this morning is making sure that this like provider table and actor table is a little less busy than it used to be. And the way that we're doing that now is we're displaying all of the human readable information, like the name of the actor, the name of the provider, things that you can parse right away. But we're hiding the actor ID and the host ID, for example, behind these little, behind these actions. And you can still click on them and copy them just as you could before. But I feel like this makes the UI look a lot cleaner. The tooltips make it pretty easy for you to tell what's going on here. And so just overall, I feel like this makes it look a lot nicer, especially as you get into like different screen sizes. It's easier to scale this kind of thing. The other thing that I've been implementing is making the washboard work for multiple hosts. So right now I actually have 2 hosts running on my local machine, this 4000 and 4001. And or maybe I have 3. It's actually, I've been testing for a little bit, so I can't quite remember. But the important thing is now, when you look at the dashboard, by default, it's showing all of the resources and all of the hosts. And by all the hosts, it's just any that you're connected to within the same lattice. But what you can do is you can select between this list of hosts to view kind of more specific information. So you can see only the actors and providers that are scheduled on this one host. You can kind of see like an overall view of how many actors and providers and the labels that are on this host. So you can see what type of, these host core are built in or default labels. So you can see the platform that it's running on. And also I have little icons here for like a little laptop for local and a little connected node for remote, just to show what's running on your actual machine alongside the dashboard and what's running away from your machine. The only other change to note here is that you are still able to start actors and providers from file when it's the local machine, because that deals with like starting it directly from your disk. But for a remote host, it's only the only option is from an OCI registry now, which is essentially exactly what we allowed before. But by default, you're going to see the actors and providers across the entire lattice. And then I guess the only other thing to show here is that I've moved the metrics over to a different tab. These are Erlang metrics, the thing that we get for free by using OTP, but they're specific for the local host. We have plans to build out the metrics, have the nice, pretty core UI over time metrics and everything. But I think that's going to be a just past MVP step. So I've moved them into this tab for now, just off of general feedback from a few community meetings ago. But I also heard feedback from Jordan and Justin that having everything on this one this one dashboard view is also useful. So as soon as we have metrics that are useful to see at a bird's eye view, that's when we want to put them here on the dashboard view. So yeah, that's a little quick update. I've got just one more thing to do for for the washboard here, and that's when you start an actor now, you'll start it from, you'll either specify the host you want to launch it on, or you can immediately auction it. Auctioning actors is working great. It'll just put it on the host that responds first. I just have to implement it for providers, and then the washboard should be ready for MVP. I guess I'd like to open the floor if anybody has any questions, comments, concerns on any of these UI changes, and just keep in mind that any of this can, we can update any of this for any feedback if you open an issue on the OTP repo.
I just want to real quick point out, I don't remember if Kasha pointed this out in the demo, but the other thing is that, when you're looking at this washboard stuff, when you see the list of hosts, each time a browser host is opened in a tab, you'll see that host in the dropdown, and you can use this same dashboard to start an actor in that browser. And it's just kind of mind-blowing that you get this flattened topology universal view of your entire lattice, regardless of whether the host is in a browser or in the cloud or on a device.
I think it's definitely awesome. And Brooks, I think it's looking a lot better. I love the I love how you're pulling everything together, and the ability to see across the lattice view now. There should be, I just think that's pretty exciting when we start to think about visualizing this and seeing it all come across here. Great work on all that. Any other questions for Brooks as he continues to go along here? The feedback that I had for you, Brooks, that I wanted to share was, I like how you've moved the metrics to the left. And I think one of the things that would, I think, be maybe for future consideration in a later release might be to do some more detailed dashboards on the left. For example, perhaps there's a host dashboard, a capability dashboard, and an actor dashboard, where if I just wanted to view that particular resource type in an environment, I could see maybe just tables of, all the metadata dumped, and, something along those lines. Feels like that might be a pattern that would be useful in a heads-up display like this. So I'll try to maybe pull some of that together. I know that there's a ton of stuff we're getting now with the OTP that we may have not had before. So I look forward to learning about that as it makes some suggestions there for you. Any other questions for Brooks? God, brilliant chat today. You guys are quite busy. Just a few quick announcements, a few new ones this week. So we are marching very quickly towards an OTP release. Date is not yet set, but expect some buildup around that. If you did not see any of the news today, there was the 3 or 4 great articles already posted and a few on the way that are talking about the excitement around wasmCloud. And we really plan to beat that drum all the way through KubeCon and into reInvent this year. August 31st in Germany, there is a new event called Better Code EU. This is a wasm.bettercode.eu, which is a WebAssembly focused event. I had a quick pull up with the team today, and they're going to let us know later if they would like a wasmCloud demo. So I dropped that over into a chat there. And excitingly, the WASM Day schedule is posted. Let me get this pulled up here. Get my screen shut out. Congratulations, David and Stuart, for being accepted as speakers at WASM Day. I, for one, am incredibly looking forward to some stunt hacking live. Cosmonic will have a sponsored keynote here later. Bailey is in our community. She's got a phenomenal talk around running WebAssembly in a database, which I love. Connor, it will be doing a platform talk from Suborbital. We've got a machine learning talk here from Shive Lamba. And what I liked about this one in particular is this is a TensorFlow talk. We did a talk around WasNN last time. Here is the talk from Stuart and team. And then we've got the Kube Warden folks who are in our community as well. We'll be talking about writing admission policies using kubewarden.io, which is moving quite quickly if you're not following it. Then we've got a Shopify talk around sort of an update on what they're doing with their platform. And this is an Akari talk, which we did do an Akari Lightning talk at the last WASM Day. We were trying to make sure we covered different content this time, but this is really dialing it into they're running Akari now in WebAssembly and a few other things. We've got a talk from Jason Song over at Ant Group, which I loved as an end user talk. They are actually putting forward a model that's somewhat similar to wasmCloud. They call it a layer 8, Leodo is what they call it, but they're running things at incredible scale. They talked about running on over 200,000 nodes. So it should be a very interesting talk. Bindle's Bundle talk from Taylor and Matt. And then Michael Wand from Second State talking about integrating, the Better Together story with Docker, Kubernetes, and WASM Edge. On the Lightning Talk side, we've got the Grain Talk, which is a language that is focused towards making WebAssembly easier to use. And then we have an IoT talk here from Sony, which is what I loved. This is a broad talk, but we're trying to focus it down to running on the tiniest of processors and some of the challenges they had there. They're running on, I think, an ESP32, which is an incredibly small and low resource chip. And then we have a WASIANN talk from Radu and Andrew. And then we have the sort of landscape talk from Matt Butcher, a National Association of W Lovers. And this is, we're looking for a few more speakers to be brought into this panel here. So I know the committee worked incredibly hard to pull together an interesting round of diverse content. And a huge thanks to everybody that contributed and everybody that submitted to that. So excited about that. Any questions about the community events? Okay, Steve, I think we're maybe, if you're, oh yeah, you are still on. I don't know if you want to maybe do an update on Scrum or roadmap stuff for the week.
Sure. Actually, I could do a quick demo first.
Oh, sure. My apologies.
Neither as mind-blowing or inspirational as Taushik's host in the browser, nor is it as colorful and interactive as Brooks's dashboard demo, but I have something almost boring in black and white I could show. So I connected together 3 capability providers: the WASM, the HTTP server, the HTTP client, and the random number generator. And
do you want to share your screen?
yeah, I'm working on that.
Sorry.
Yes, shared. Okay. And it's a XKCD comic generator. So it uses the HTTP server to invoke the actor. And then it uses a random number generator to pick a random comic. And then the HTTP client to go out to the XKCD site and fetch the metadata, the image URL, and the title. And so every time you refresh, you get a new comic. And it's all in about 60 lines of code to talk to 3 capability providers.
Yeah, I may use this demo an awful lot. I'm just saying, it's I could see myself hitting refresh all day long.
This is an actor you said that's running?
Yes, it's an actor.
I wonder if we can throw this in the browser host and render the invocation.
Yeah, sure.
That is true.
Yeah, I think this is a solid demo because you get to bring the added joy of XKCD into your into your demo. So I think this would make it great to demo pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Great job, Steve.
Kaushik
Go ahead.
Kaushik will be impressed with my really fancy HTML there. There's the whole page generation.
It's amazing.
Steve, can you show some of the code that you're using, like to use these providers?
Yeah. Yep. So here's the code to get a random number within any inclusive range. So that's one of the built-in capability providers. So there's a built-in logging and a built-in number capability provider that gives you random numbers and generates GUIDs and things. Here's the HTTP client. It fetches the URL, gets the result, and then we generate the web page and send it as the response. That's part of the HTTP server. So that's pretty much the whole thing. There's some odds and ends imports and
So
structure and wrapper, but there you go.
I think what I just heard, Brooks, was that if you type the Konami code into washboard, that you get an XKCD, you get a random XKCD, is what I just heard.
I mean, I'm not saying that we already have a JavaScript handler listening for the Konami code, but if we did, we could do that.
All right. Well, I think we may have just made magic happen. All right. Well, phenomenal progress, Steve, and excellent job on the inspiration for Easter eggs as well, which I think is fun.
Thank you. As far as the sprints, we are making great progress, and we are pretty close to functionally complete. The main stuff we have left to do is documentation and testing, and we will have maybe I think by next week's call, we'll be able to give you a date on when the .50 launches.
All right, that's incredible. I know you and Kevin and Brooks and others have just been slaving away at this for a while. Thank you for the extra organization and all the also putting on your Scrum Master hat to help us keep all that in track and measured. Any feedback on the weekly reports that Steve is putting out? I kind of feel like that's a wall of text. We've been trying to drop that in weekly now for a month. And I don't know that we really get a lot of comments or feedback on it. That people just skip over it when it drops into general on the what happened last week, what we're going to try to accomplish next week. Maybe should we try formatting it up a little bit, making it look nicer, or anybody have any feedback on that?
Not on that, but I think we have been wanting to share the recordings of some of the stuff that's happened in these meetings. And
that has been my error. I had hired someone that was going to do it for us, and it didn't work out. So I have been just overwhelmed on getting those up. I can try to get the last couple up if there's ones you have in mind more quickly. But I am looking for a resource to hire that can just reliably, show up, dump the meeting, and upload it. We've just been completely swamped lately with a million things on the back end here.
Okay. No, that's okay. That's fine.
Jordan, volunteer.
Yeah, I can handle it.
All right. Well, I have the recordings. If you, what I'll do is I'll get them uploaded, and we can maybe do one or two together, and then I can let you loose on them. And it can be, a paid position if you want. I'm totally open to that. Yeah.
I accept hugs as currency, and that's about it.
Well, if you're lucky, I actually just found I don't remember DerbyCon.
I can't see your blur thingy is blurring it.
Oh, it says it's a man hug ticket. It was from Relic. Dave was always phenomenal for epic hugs. And so I
That's
was
fun.
cleaning out some old, hacking project, and I found one of these folded between the pages of a notebook around hacking Wi-Fi or something like that. So epic.
That's fun.
All right, I will get them uploaded, Jordan, and I really appreciate that. It would be a huge uplift for us all right now, because I know that was super helpful, and we did have a pretty reliable stream of people watching stuff. So we'll start today, and we'll try to pick that back up again. David, thank you for the gentle reminder on that. What about anything else? Open floor, calls to action. Kevin, you have your RFC out for the Kubernetes controller. Anything you want to ask for feedback on there?
So the RFC isn't actually for the Kubernetes controller. It's for a controller to be used by other controllers, one of which could be a Kubernetes controller. I know it's kind of splitting hairs, but yeah, I mean, generally, the more feedback I get on that, the better. I'd like to start actually working on that and setting up some scaffolding around it so that other people can start contributing.
Okay. No, it's not lost on me the difference of the building the right API versus marrying this to Kubernetes. But I do think that if we got to a CRD for this, that people would be super excited to have that on the Better Together story.
Yeah, I think my biggest, the biggest open question right now is what sort of Easter egg I want to put in there and how I want to trigger it.
All right, XKCD and Emacs, it is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I looked over it. It looks like building an actor on top of it. Oh, sorry, long day. Building a Kubernetes controller on top of it. Like, it seems like it's got most of the things. And realistically, you could build a Kubernetes controller that just has like link definitions, and you assume that you never delete link definitions, and then that would be enough for an MVP. So yeah, I think it's definitely good enough to go to like get started with.
Yeah, I'm guessing there'll be a Kubernetes operator that just watches a CRD and forwards it to the lattice controller.
Yeah, that was the idea. Though we do actually support deleting link definitions now.
Okay. But yeah, you wouldn't want if you've got a multi-cloud cluster, you wouldn't want the Kubernetes operator over here to be causing links to be deleted over here.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not sure how you would there's something there, but I don't think that needs to be a thing. You can just have it as a documented, like the Kubernetes controller cannot delete link definitions, and then leave it at that.
Yep.
And then it can only add and override.
Yeah, we can do some thinking about it over the weekend and maybe have a chat with you next week, Kevin. See what we can do.
Okay, brilliant. Any further discussion or other topics to bring up today? All right, well, I'll go ahead and stop recording and we can hang out here. Cheers.